Welcome back. Well, the UN Climate Change Conference, COP25, has kicked off in Madrid, Spain. This year's conference is calling for more robust action from governments to limit global warming. In South Africa, Amnesty International wants the government to commit to a more ambitious climate plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So for more on this, I'm joined by Amnesty International spokesperson in South Africa, Jennifer Wiles. Jennifer, thanks a lot for joining us this evening. I mean, I know that a lot of pressure has been put on the South African government to really take on a more robust role when it comes to tackling the effects of global warming.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and thank you for having me. So this COP25, we're really calling on the South African government to up their ambition and action on climate action to really make sure that we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions so that we're in line with keeping below the 1.5 degrees Celsius global temperature rise.
I mean, on the other side of it, I mean, it's one would criticize it, especially African states. I've seen a lot of conversations around African states saying, okay, but why doesn't the West do more? Because they seem to be the ones that are significantly guilty of the emissions of gas.
Yep, it's a fair argument. But, you know, here in Africa, and especially in sub-Saharan Africa, South Africa is one of the biggest emitters. We are heavily reliant on coal. We're also part of the G20, and the G20 are responsible for almost up to 80% of carbon emissions at the moment, which is huge. You know, we don't have an option to dodge this anymore. We've really got to up our ambition and really take a stand, especially in the continent and in sub-Saharan Africa.
Taking a stand at the expense of what? Because many would say that, I mean, I'm just looking at even the recommendations coming in and the reports coming in from Eskom saying that they will be utilizing coal for a long period to come right now, right? A lot of the power stations run on coal, right? So when we're saying that we're going to take a more leadership role and we have to be more innovative in the way in which we tackle climate change, etc., how do we do so, and at what expense?
So, do you know, I've actually got four major recommendations that I want South Africa to really take on board, and I hear the argument for coal. But, you know, the first recommendation and thing that I'm really calling on South African government to do is to look at their NDC. Now, the NDC is essentially our national climate plan, where we set out what we're going to do to lower our carbon emissions. And all the states have been given 1 year to relook at their NDCs and to reshape them. And I really want South Africa to take this opportunity to make sure that our NDC is in line with our commitments to fulfilling and protecting human rights at home and on the continent. Second of all, what I'm really wanting South Africa to do is around Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. Now, what that is if the NDC is what we're going to do to change our carbon emissions, Article 6 is about how we're going to do that. And what I want South Africa to do is really encourage conversations and push for rules that ensure that no one is left behind. Now, this means making sure that communities, workers, any person on the street, women, children, are consulted in processes. So consulted if, you know, a new plant is going to be put up or a new climate project is going to be there. We want their consent. We want them to have access to information. So that's really important. And then we also want to make sure that South Africa makes sure and ensures that there's a gender element to all these climate plans that are going through, because that's really important too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing what you're saying. The question then is the rest of the global community hearing it? Right? So is it hearing it from South Africa or from an African state, or are these voices going to fall by the wayside at the expense of big coffers?
It's a risk, it really is, but I really think that South Africa is such an important country in the geographic region we are. And, you know, we have our own youth out there on the streets. You know, every Friday we're doing climate protests. We've seen Greta. She's now at COP25 as well. She's there. We've got young voices. We've got people really trying to put this message out here. And, you know, we don't have time. We have 10 years to avoid a climate catastrophe. So, quite frankly, we don't have an option not to listen.
Let me ask you this. Do communities, I mean, you're saying that communities need to be consulted more in terms of, you know, whatever it is, whether it's plants and whatever building and project that one is about to do and embark on, and if it's got an impact on the climate, if it's got an impact on life in itself, people need to be consulted. My question then to you is, do people care? And I'm asking you this as a young person, because you speak about Greta, but I've also got a young person sitting next to me right now on the table who's also advocating for such. But do people care?
People have to care. It's not an environmental issue anymore. It's a human rights issue. It's affecting our right to life, our right to health, housing, water, sanitation. We've seen it all over the continent and here in South Africa. Cape Town came so close to day zero. In the Karoo, they're experiencing unprecedented water shortages and drought. KZN, we've got these tropical storms. You know, this isn't a coincidence. This is because of global warming. We don't have an option not to listen anymore. In Mpumalanga, the air pollution is so bad from the coal plants there. This is all contributing to the warming of our country. We just don't have an option and we need to listen.
Yeah. Again, how do you advocate for South Africans to start listening? What do we do from a government perspective? Because ultimately it's going to filter down to the person, right? The person, the individual that is you and me, who are citizens, who care enough to actually close a tap, right, or not to litter, or to use paper straws instead of using plastic. All of this, it comes down to you and I being able to implement. But do people know that you and I are the ones that actually hold the power to changing the status quo of the climate?
We do. And you know what? It comes down to actually Amnesty's main message, which is taking things and injustices personally. You've got to look at yourself, look at the person next to you, and just think, this is happening now.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to be seeing it. It's getting even worse. It's getting hotter and hotter. Water's getting more scarce. We just don't have an option. So you've got to look at it from within yourself and just think, you know, it's happening and it's happening fast.
The passion with which you speak, only one can say all the best. I love it when young people have got a very strong voice when it comes to climate change, because you're saying it's a human rights issue. It's no longer an environmental issue, but rather it's a human rights issue, as Jennifer Wiles, Amnesty International spokesperson in South Africa, has quite rightly articulated. Whilst